Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and today I'm absolutely delighted to have as my guest Dilip Barman, who actually wears many, many hats. He's the president of the Triangle Vegetarian Society in North Carolina. He's a Food for Life instructor connected with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I love that he's the director of nutrition education for the Central Park School in North Carolina, working on healthy plant-based snacks. And he's got a huge background in math and computer science. Dilip, welcome. You've got so many hats that you're involved with. I love it. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world, championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Thank you, Frank. It's an honor to be with you today.
Yeah, let me ask you, because we'll start right off, because I know you go back having worked for IBM in the computer field, and you did a lot of computer science, and now you even teach math in that Mathematic Associate Institute of the Triangle, and so
MIT.
you still and so you still keep your hat in math education, computer science, and all of that. Tell me, what was the aha moments going back when you were first involved in looking at plant-based lifestyle?
Thanks for asking, Frank. So my background, my parents were early immigrants from India. They came in 1960. Most of us know lots of people from South Asia, right? When my parents came in 1960, did you know there was less than 13,000 from South Asia in this country? 13,000 is a tiny number. That's the whole country. My dad was a grad student in Philadelphia, and so they didn't even have Indian groceries in Philadelphia. They had to take a bus, and New York City did have some Indian spices. So I come from a vegetarian background, and one thing which will surprise some folks who know a little bit about me is I never wanted to ask my parents this. And later on, we can talk about why they're not with us anymore. You can see my mom behind me. It's because of the dairy they consume, but we can come to that if you would like to. So I imagine, I didn't want to ask them. My mom and dad must have thought, there's no people from India here. We don't know the culture. Most boys don't cook. Of course, I teach cooking. I'm the cook in my family, but most boys don't cook. What's this poor boy going to do growing up in this meat-eating country? So they introduced me to meat, but it was always, some of your viewers may be Jewish or Hindu or Muslim, where there's dietary laws. And in Hinduism, meat eating is considered dirty by some Hindus anyhow. And so my mom would take me to Dog and Suds, which was a place in Ohio, or to McDonald's. And but when I would eat meat, I would have to wash my hands and my lips with soap. And so this is a long answer to your question, and interrupt me if I'm going too long. But I come from a background of vegetarianism, and I understand that side of it because when my brothers, one of my brothers and my aunt have always been vegetarian. And they would criticize me. They say, Dilip, what you're eating is a dead animal. And I would munch along and say, so what? I didn't bother me. And I think that experience has proven very useful to me because I can see the other perspective. It's a normal. It's like, I would just make the arguments, animals eat other animals and we're animals. So, but the thing is, when I was in college, my second year in college, we didn't have dorms. We had to live in an apartment. So my mom helped get me settled and we went grocery shopping. And I started picking up some dead animal stuff. And then I looked at it because to this point I was eating cooked foods, right? But in the grocery store, I looked at this and I said, this is a dead animal. And I felt guilty. And I said, I know for a fact, most of my family's been vegetarian forever, not vegan, but vegetarian. I know that you can eat and thrive without eating meat. I didn't understand at that point that how healthy it was to not eat meat.
Right.
Now that's what I teach. I promote that. And so I gave up eating meat for ethical reasons, not for health reasons at that point, but for ethical reasons. Now, my journey went further. You were asking about promoting plant-based eating.
I want to know, I want to get from where you just stated, what was the next step to really committing to being completely vegan, I guess, is really the question. How did you move from dairy, which really had a major tradition in your family and in the eating habits of your family? So you not only put meat aside, you had to put dairy aside. Let's talk little bit about that journey.
In graduate school, I was at Brown University, and we had an assistant, one of the secretaries there. Ginny was her name, and Ginny was a vegan, and I'd never really heard the word vegan. This is back in like the late '80s, early '90s. I had never really heard the word vegan, and she invited me. And I'm going to jump ahead and come back to this in a second.
Yeah.
Can I brag for a second?
Yeah, of course.
I'm bad at many things, but one thing that I'm pretty good at is I host the country's biggest. I call it Vegetarian Thanksgiving, all vegan, of course. Biggest vegetarian Thanksgiving in the country. For we've been doing it for like 25 years. It's been the biggest for like the last 15, 16 years. So anyhow, vegan Thanksgiving. Ginny invited me to Vegan Thanksgiving, Rhode Island. There was an animal rights group, and I went and I enjoyed the food, and there was all this literature which I picked up and I read. And I got it. This made sense. Why are we eating the secretions of dead animals? I don't think I understood it deeply at that point. Now I, of course, understand that if you have to eat animal products, which you don't need to, note animal products, but if you have to eat animal products, which you don't, then meat is a better choice than dairy for lots of reasons. Don't eat either one. Don't eat either one. But dairy is much worse than meat. And so I started getting glimmers of that when I was in Rhode Island. I didn't go vegan. I moved to North Carolina. I took over the Triangle Vegetarian Society, which is listed right here. And I was honest about it because I got it here, but I didn't get it here. I was
Right.
addicted to dairy. I didn't eat a lot of dairy. I didn't drink cow's milk, but I like my Swiss cheese and brie and stuff like that. And so I was in a leadership position at a time where veganism was still kind of evolving. There have been vegans for a long time promoting veganism, but in the large, it still wasn't such a big thing in the early 90s. So I started giving talks. I led the group and I said, guys, the best thing to do for an ethical, environmental, or health point of view is to be vegan. And I am now, but back then I said, but I'm not. I was close, but I didn't really have it as a goal because I didn't really understand how much impact I was making. But I was eating less and less dairy. And one day I used to travel for IBM, and I remember going to a conference, and in the conference they had all this, these snacks, and they had these blocks of cheese, and I didn't have the blocks of cheese. And I said to myself, I've gotten this for some years now. Can't I be, do I have to be so selfish that I have to eat these foods that at that point appealed to me? And I gave it up. I became a vegan. So for me, it was a bit of it was like a 3, 4 year journey for me. I got it, but I didn't really do it. And in turn, as somebody who promotes plant-based eating, I get that. When I tell people, here's all the benefits of plant-based eating, and they don't go plant-based immediately, I get it. Although, Frank, in today's world, it's so easy being vegan. It's so
Right.
easy being vegan. I make my own yogurt and I give it to guests. I say, "Can you tell this is non-dairy? It only has soy and water. Period."
Right.
So it's easy. That's my long-winded answer to your
No, no,
question.
it's a good answer.
Did I
Dilip,
answer it?
in your journey, though, as you were making those changes, were there any health considerations? I know originally it was all really about animal protection, animal rights, and all of that. Were there any health issues in you or your family that you observed that you started to link with this idea that, we're eating in a way that may be fostering these pathological changes? So, did you overcome any health issues? Did you see any health issues in your parents or relatives that you thought were tied into the ways that they were eating at that point?
Well, Frank, all the work I do in the space of health, I like it to be evidence-based.
Right.
If you want, later we can talk about Physicians Committee and the Food for Life program that I feel very lucky that I'm part of a very, very small part of the program. And everything we do in the Food for Life program promotes health from a evidence point of view.
Right.
There is evidence, I don't have it in front of me, but it turns out that the Indian vegetarian diet has worse health outcomes than the sad standard American diet, which includes meat and some dairy. And it's because there's so much dairy in the Indian diet and fried foods. So to answer your question, let me first reflect on myself. Not really, but for this point, I always was out of work twice a year. And one time it would be a doozy. It would be for like a week or 10 days. I'd get a bad flu. And then there'd be a second incidence of like a flu. I'd be out for a day or two. And what I'm about to say, I've heard a lot of vegans say, and so far I know Michael Clapper was doing some research in this area. There's not, this isn't evidence-based what I'm about to say. It's anecdotal. When I gave up dairy, no more colds, no more flus. I remember I was speaking at the World Vegetarian Congress in Scotland, and I was biking through rainy, cold weather. And one day I got a little bit of a sniffle. It lasted a day. I wasn't really sick. It didn't interfere with anything I did. And occasionally I get a little bit of, I get down just a little bit, maybe a minor cold for a day, maybe two.
Right.
Never caught COVID. I still mask. I've never caught COVID. And so anecdotally, absolutely, giving up the dairy, I went from healthy to healthy without getting sick. I just really, how long have I been vegan? Maybe 25 years. And I can honestly say, with minor exceptions, I've not been sick. I haven't gotten the flu. I haven't gotten the cold. Right. So I've seen that. But I've seen, what else I've seen? And I think this is really the point of your question is both my parents have passed away, but it seemed like a couple times a year, hey, Dilip, your uncle has passed away, your aunt has passed away. She had a heart attack. Now she's in a convalescent home. Now she can't feed herself. And these were all vegetarians. And so the common thread, Frank, was these were all heavy dairy consumers
Right.
and fried food consumers. So yeah, I did see that. I saw the dairy. My
I'm,
mom
you go ahead.
my mom died of a stroke, and we can talk more about that if you would like to. And one thing that happened, she was in and out of the hospital. And to be honest, when she fell down after her stroke, I wish she had passed away. It seems like a cruel thing to say, but the remaining 5, 6 months of her life were terrible. I know if she had her will and she could open her mouth and say, she would say, "Shame on you, Dilip. You're degrading me. Pull the plug. Don't let them keep me alive," because her life was miserable. It was, she had no privacy. You know, um, she couldn't take care of her personal needs. And so when we were at Duke Hospital once after she kept falling and from the nursing home going to the hospital, they asked me, "Your mom consumed a lot of dairy, didn't she?" And they showed me some images from her brain and said, "This is indicative uh, of a heavy dairy consumption."
Well, that's what I was going to say. As much as we've all seen these anecdotal results, the data that has accumulated on saturated fat, on oxysterols, on opiate, various kinds of opiates in dairy, we now have a lot more of an evidence base for how that may be triggering vascular blockage disease. So that's a nice thing that evidence base is kind of accumulating a lot better. But the truth is, before all of that, I think everyone anecdotally that dealt with people with consuming a lot of dairy saw a lot of those kinds of things: mucus production, vascular blockage, congestion, and counseling so many children many years ago.
Diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure.
Right, all of that. So, and there's more, there's more of that data accumulating from the fat and especially the fat content in dairy. We're going to take just a short break, Dylan, and hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. Dr. Frank Sabatino here, encouraging you to check out the NHA membership. For just $35 a year in the US and $55 internationally, you'll have access to a wealth of resources, including our quarterly full-color print magazine, Health Science. Stay updated on the latest health tools, inspiring stories, and exclusive events like the NHA Conference and plant-exclusive cruises. Join us at healthscience.org/membership and make a difference in your life and the world. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host, and now back to the NHA Health Science Podcast, where more exciting insights await you. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm here with Dilip Barman, and we're talking, we were just finishing our conversation on dairy. Let's go for another segue because you played a very instrumental role as being the executive producer on a really, really incredible internationally distributed film, Code Blue. And I want to talk about how you segued into being in that position. And for people that don't know, and you can clarify this too, Code Blue was really addressing how the plant-based lifestyle not only could prevent, but reverse some of the most devastating diseases that we suffer with as a culture. And that became important because for too many docs, they're really just disease managers and not really healthcare providers. This clearly was providing an evidence base and a clinical base to show how powerful plant-based living is. Can you talk about how you got connected to that and what your role was in that particular film?
Thanks for asking, Frank. So, one of my life missions ever since I got turned on to veganism, and by the way, I promote lots of things. I used to be the on the Open Space and Trails Commission here in the city I live in, and I was the head of the bicycling committee, and we put bikes on bike racks and buses. I promoted a lot of environmental things. I promote lots of things, but the thing I like, Frank, so much about plant-based eating is the evidence is overwhelming. There's no downside. There's no
Right.
downside, right? Eating low on the food chain makes common sense, and there's mountains of evidence that it's the best thing for us from a diet point of view, and there's mountains of evidence it's by far the best thing we can do for the environment.
Right.
And it surprises me that more people don't talk about it. People say, oh, take shorter showers and so forth. But I'm straying from your question, which I usually do. So please stop my meanders. Let's go back to what you asked me. So since I promote veganism, the opportunity came up. I didn't know Saray Stancic. Now we're very good friends. So Saray had begun talking about her journey, and for those viewers who don't know her story, she was a doctor. May I relate a summary of what happened to
Of
her?
course, I
Yeah.
want you to tell the story for sure.
Sarai was a doctor, and she didn't have a particularly good diet. And I have a lot to say about that if you'd like later in the program about medicine. I spent some time in medical school and dietary choices. Doctors just don't generally get much nutrition education whatsoever, maybe a handful of hours. So she was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. She was eating more or less a standard American diet. Her doctor, because doctors have doctors, her doctor said to her, here's the therapy, here's the medication, here's what you need to do," and she followed it. But it had so many side effects, and it was very difficult. So she did her own research. She looked at PubMed, did her own research, and found out there's evidence. There's going back decades that plant-based diet can help with MS. So of course nobody should self-diagnose, even a doctor. So she went with the evidence to her doctor and said, "Hey, doc, look, here's some evidence. Can we try it?" The doctor said, "No, I'd like you to follow this regimen, please." And so she did. But then she said, "I'm a big girl now. I'm a doctor. I know what I'm doing. Here's the evidence." And she said, "I'm going to follow it." And I'm not suggesting to your viewers that you take your medical care in your own hands. But in this case, Sarai had done a lot of research and herself was a doctor. So she said, let's do this. And she consulted with other folks. And the film is the story about her life, about her being diagnosed with this debilitating condition and following a plant-based diet, a healthy plant-based diet, and becoming largely symptom-free. Is her MS gone? Nope. And does she have recurrences? Yeah, but it's far better than it was. She was wheelchair bound, and now
Right.
she runs races. She walks. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's really phenomenal to think about. I think people need to know. I mean, if you allow me to digress with that, because in MS, you're really causing a degeneration of the myelin sheath around major nerve trunks, and myelin sheath provides the concept of capacitance that allows electrical conduction. So the idea that you could have a condition where you're losing that physical component and that sheath and have a result like hers from eating plant-based is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, you're talking about a reinstitution of the myelin sheath physiology in the tissues of the brain and spinal cord. And so when you think about that, it is actually quite mind bending to think about how powerful a change that is from just going in a plant-based direction. I just wanted our listeners to kind of get the miraculous part of that, because it really is amazing when you think about it.
to answer your question, how did I get involved? I didn't know her, Dr. Stancic, and so I saw something. I think on social media or on the internet where she was working on this film and she wanted some help. So I do lots of things, and one thing you may not know, Frank, is I'm a film reviewer, and I actually occasionally teach a class in film studies.
Okay. Well, I knew you did photography. I didn't know you did film study too. So
Yeah. So I don't know how to make a film, but I know how to analyze the film.
Right, right, right,
So
right.
I write reviews. And so I have a little bit of a foot in the film industry. I know some filmmakers, and I know a little bit about the craft and art. I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit. And so I said, I know enough about it that I think I can contribute a little bit of expertise. And I always wanted to be involved with a film. So I gave it a try. I called her and said, "This is who I am, and this is what I do, and my expertise is more in the plant-based world, but I know a little bit about film, and maybe we can, play together and do something nice." And the relationship blossomed. It's just been wonderful. We've done so many screenings, virtual screenings, in-person screenings. I don't think I've ever done an in-person screening with her, but I've done lots of virtual ones with her where we're both online and we take questions and answer them. And it's been a lovely experience for me. I'd like to make another film at some point. I was able to bring in some fabulous talent. Uh, John Corey, for example, who was involved with Forks Over Knives. So
Right.
he's a friend of mine, and there were parts of the film I thought could really benefit from some of his production, and he agreed. So we brought him, and we decided to. I don't know if you know this, but we released Code Blue not that long after I got involved, and I didn't have a huge opportunity to make an impact at that point. At that point, I was making some impact, but then when we brought it out to market, we had time to go back and look at some of the flaws. It was slightly too long. The music was disjoint. We hired a gentleman who made an orchestration for the whole thing, so it was cohesive. We brought additional talent in, and so that was my involvement, and my involvement continues. We still have screenings. The film has been out now, what, 2, 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, from I think 2020, I think, is when it
Think
was first
so.
released. So that's great.
Yeah, so 3, 4 years. And so we're still getting requests and we still are happy. It's still topical. I think I'm proud of it. I think it's a great film. We have wonderful people in it. And I think we try to make a soft sell. And this is one thing that Sarai and I have talked about at points, is that I'm not on camera whatsoever. I'm behind the scenes. But on camera, at some point, she makes the point. I'm not saying you have to be 100% vegan, but you have to move plant-based and move more and so forth. And I had a little bit of a discussion with her because I thought we should maybe be a little stronger, because I do feel that we should say, yeah, let's aim for being 100% plant-based. But I also, in my own classes, and I agreed with her, we want to be soft. That come aboard. There's no reason that I can see that you don't want to be 100% plant-based, but there's cultural reasons or opportunities. You live with a family, and some of your family doesn't eat this way, so I can understand why some people move but don't become 100%. The fact is, all the evidence I've seen, and Frank, correct me if you've seen anything contrary, I haven't, that the more you move towards eating plants, the better your health is. Is it even better 100%? Yes. Now, also correct me if you're wrong, if you have seen other evidence. I am waiting for the research study, and I'm sure it's going to come out that yes, 100% does make a difference over, say, 99%. Now, I'm talking about from a health point of view. I started this, and I still am an ethical vegan. As an ethical vegan, first of all, I have no interest in eating any animal foods whatsoever. But is the occasional piece of dead turkey okay from an ethical point of view? No.
No, definitely
From
not.
a health point of view, probably it's okay. If you're eating at Thanksgiving, you eat a little bit of a turkey. If you're not an ethical vegan and you're a health vegan, probably makes no difference at all, right? To the
Well,
environment or health.
the thing that complicates that is that if you look at studies like the China study, or you look at the blue zone cultures, most of those cultures have some small amount of animal material while still sustaining these very productive long
Longevity.
lives. So it
Yeah.
makes it so to get one that's completely vegan without any of that, it's a challenging situation to
The
say the
data isn't
least.
there. Right.
But
It's
the
hard to.
bottom line is, and here's the kicker, is that because it's such a constellation of factors, because in those cultures, you're not only looking at food, you're looking at physical activity, you're looking at community, you're looking at spiritual connection, you're looking at so
Rest.
many things that motivate healthy outcome in human populations. And that's what kind of complicates it a little bit to go from that 98 to 100%. But people like Colin Campbell talked about the fact that in the China study, when they were eating animal material, it was like 2 ounces a week. Yeah, it was like 2 ounces a week. So I tell people, if you can live on 2 ounces a week, you can live on no ounces a week. And the bottom line is, why go there at all? But your point is well made. It would be interesting to see a long-term epidemiological study that is strictly 100% vegan, animal, whole food, plant foods, and see what that outcome is and if there are any differences. But the truth of the matter is, when we look at the productivity of staying mostly plant-based, we see, I mean, it is the game changer, not only for young people, but for the elderly people like me that have been vegans for almost 50 years.
Wow,
And
you
we're,
beat
and
me
we're
by quite a bit.
yeah, and I'm going to be 74 this year, and I'm still race walking 9 and 10 minute miles. The last doctor I saw was when I was 15. I've been around at least a half a dozen people so COVID contaminated without a mask and did not have one drop of any kind of infection. And so the bottom line is, it is unreal the outcome that happens. And people need to know that when they embrace this. Dilip, where can people find you if they need to find you? What's a good URL so they can pursue learning more about you and more of the things that you're doing?
There's a lot of them, but I'll just give you one. I'm really proud of a program I've been doing. We just did our 50th show. It's every month. It's called So Many Cooks in the Kitchen.
Yeah, I'm going to
Uh,
talk to you about that. So that's good that you
yeah.
brought this up now.
So you can find me there. That's one place, and I'm active on social media as well. On Twitter, I still call it Twitter. Um, to be honest, on Twitter, most of my tweets are about math and math education, but some are on plant-based eating.
Well, I
But
like I like your passion for math. I think it's great. Let's talk about this because you're a food educator through PCRM. You're one of their food for life instructors. And I gathered that your So Many Cooks in the Kitchen was a way to gather a number of these instructors to provide wonderful tips about food preparation and so on for people tuning in. And I got the feeling that it also spun off So Many Kids in the Kitchen. So it spawned off another kind of development. So talk about how that came to be and talk about what you accomplish with that program. Let our audience know about that.
everybody's online now, right? So I'll brag a tiny bit. So back when the pandemic hit, I was Food for Life is a nutrition education program of the Physicians Committee. We have classes to help you maintain health, and if you end up with diabetes or cancer, we have classes specifically for those conditions, how to help manage and possibly reverse some of these conditions. We can talk about reversing later if you'd like. And so I was in the midst of teaching one of these classes, Kickstart Your Health, and we were in class 2 or 3, and the pandemic hit. Remember, it was all of a sudden everything got canceled, and I didn't know the severity of COVID. So I was emailing with my students saying, "Should we meet? Should we not meet?" And I canceled it. Then I wrote a note the next day, "Let's meet. It doesn't seem that bad, and we can keep distance." And but then the people who owned the venue closed. They said, "Nope, we're not having it."
Uh-huh.
So I transitioned immediately. We took that week off, but then I said, "I don't want to miss my students. We're learning all this cool stuff, and they're really enjoying learning about the." I had a vegan in the class, but he was learning about the health aspects, right, of plant-based eating, and then I had people who weren't even vegan. So I said, let's try going online. And I was, I think, the first or one of the very first Physicians Committee Food for Life instructors to do it online. And now I'm not the expert. There's many Food for Life instructors who are far better at it than I am. But I was one of the first. And so headquarters said, "Hey, Dilip, will you put together a PD, a professional development for all the other instructors?" And I was the first to do it, I feel pretty proud of that. So I put together this presentation. I went over, they said, "Go ahead, go over." And I gave all these details: what kind of camera, what kind of lighting, how do you time it, what do you do? And I went through step by step how to do a class, how to get the materials out. So anyhow, in that time period, in our internal communications, I said, it'd be nice to reach people, who aren't necessarily just taking our classes. And so we got a lot of we got about a dozen, 20 Food for Life instructors who said, "Yeah, I'm with you. Let's do something." So we started having meetings, and with just a couple meetings, we said, "Let's do it." We came up with a name, So Many Cooks in the Kitchen, like too many cooks burn this thing. So this is So Many
Right.
Cooks in the Kitchen. And our first topic was beans. So we called it So Many Beans. And what we did is we had a camera, and if our viewers go to somanycooks.com, you can see any of our shows. And looking back, the Beans one, the technology, now I'm with you on StreamYard. That's what we use as well. We were on Zoom, and it was the technology wasn't great. And so I did an introduction. I had all these beans, different kinds of beans, and I showed how to pressure cook them, how to cook them on the stove, how to get rid of issues of gas. I don't even think I cooked that particular show. And then I introduced the next speaker. So we went kitchen to kitchen around the world. We went to somebody in Italy, somebody in Abu Dhabi, somebody in Nebraska, Rhode Island, and
Fabulous.
so forth. It was really nice. Uh,
Fabulous.
and it worked great. So we said, let's keep doing it. And then three of us, myself, and then my friend Cody Stubbe, and Ella Rodriguez. Ella's in Rhode Island. Cody's in Nebraska. Fellow Food for Life instructors. They said, we have little kids, and I do too. I was a homeschooling dad, and we said, why don't we put the kids on camera? So we started So Many Kids in the Kitchen.
Love
So
it.
Many Cooks in the Kitchen is every single month. And I invite folks to check it out. We do it every single month. We give things away. We give books away. Brenda Davis, my favorite nutritionist, is so kind. Every single issue, she's written a postscript, a appendix. So each of us writes a little bit about nutrition and about our recipes. They're not vegan, they're whole food plant-based with limited or no fat, no oil. And then she writes an appendix. She's awesome. Brenda is not only smart and awesome, she's so kind.
Yeah, Brenda's a one. I know Brenda. She's just a lovely, lovely
She's awesome.
person.
And so we publish this document. It's available for free, and it has her work as well. And then every other month, more or less, we have the kids in the kitchen.
I think it's fantastic. So the kids come in every month also with you.
Every other month or so.
Yeah. Now, as a homeschool dad, this is a big issue. The fact of the matter is you're very much involved in child education because, many people talk about how important that really is that they start early. And my experience was raising my kids that if kids either grow it or make it, they usually will eat it. That was my experience. Well, I had them in the kitchen from the get-go. My kids are now
Me too.
they're all in their early 30s. They know how to do all their own food prep. They do all of that, which is great. But I know that you're also the director of nutritional education for this Central Park school system in North Carolina, and that you created a healthy snack program. Talk about how that came to be, and were there any obstacles to doing that? Are there any strains right now to continue to do that? Talk a little bit about that if you can.
Thanks for asking. The answer is a little complicated. I am the nutrition education director of Central Park School for Children in Durham, North Carolina. But the truth of the matter is, my position has been dormant since the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, all food items stepped down. So I have that title, but I'm not doing it at the moment. And last year and this year, we've been saying let's resume it, and there's been a few new obstacles, so it hasn't rehappened. That's the sad news. The good news is I've spawned this elsewhere. So keep my fingers crossed that we'll continue at Central Park. But my friend Cody Stubbe, who's I mentioned her name a little while ago, as a fellow cook in the kitchen, and her kids are kids in the kitchen. So she has a healthy snack program that I helped her to start with a wonderful teacher. Rachel Harding is her name, in Omaha, Nebraska. So she's been doing it now for 2 years, and then let's see, Merrill. Oh, I'm blanking on Merrill's last name. You know Merrill. So Merrill in Wisconsin is doing the program in Southwest, I guess, Wisconsin area with, I think, 2 schools. And then I'm working with a relatively new food for life instructor in Southern Alabama. And bless her heart is what she would say. That's what they say in Southern Alabama. Bless her heart. She's working with all of these low-income schools, and she's working with preschools. Last I counted,
Fabulous.
she had like 3 or 4 schools. So let me tell you what the Healthy Snack Program is. Healthy Snack Program is, I got some donated funds, and what I do is I get teachers. They don't have to be vegan, but if they agree to be part of the program, we get the principal to sign off, we get this teacher to sign off. We give them an Instant Pot. We buy them whatever they need. We buy them a refrigerator. We buy them. I prefer not to have throwaway stuff. So in Cody's case, she actually worked with the town to do composting. The school does not compost except for the Healthy Snack Program. So all of they use, at first they were using compostable paper plates. We would buy compostable paper plates. I can't remember if they're still doing that or if they have real plates at this point. And so that all goes into a bin, and once a week the city would come and compost their stuff. So the teacher gets food. We show up with 4 or 5 bags of groceries, preferably all organic. And we go in and cook 2 things. I give them a book. It has like a dozen recipes or 15 recipes. It has things like oatmeal, no sugar, no maple syrup. It's sweetened with apples. We have a recipe for scrambled tofu, for tofu with vegetables, with beans and greens. We have quinoa. We have how to make your own strawberry jam, all sorts of things. And we prepare 2 dishes in front of the teacher, unpack their Instant Pot, show them how it works, make a couple dishes, and then we usually leave them either with a gift card or just tell them, do your own shopping, or we can bring food for you and we'll pay you, so they don't have to pay anything out of their own pockets. And at the end of the year, or sometimes a couple times in the year, we give them money as a stipend, because I'm a teacher, right? I'm not a full-time classroom teacher, but I've taught for many years,
Right.
and so I know teachers don't have time. And so my goal with this program is that the teacher should spend no more than, it used to be 5 minutes, now it's 7 to 10 minutes of prep time, and then maybe a little bit more time cleaning up at the end of the day. And we also get access to the kids. So we ask once a month, maybe more often, that we come into the classroom and give a talk about plant-based eating. I remember with kindergartners, sometimes I'd bring like kohlrabi, which looked like a spaceship, and kids would look at it and their eyes would be big. I would say share different kinds of tangerines and oranges, talk about them, cut them open. People could try it. Um, Also, in my school system that I work at, there's a lot of people who just don't have enough money. There are people on the school lunch program, and I'm sensitive to that. So we talk about issues of economy, that we can't all shop at co-ops and
Right.
Whole Foods markets and places like that. Some of the students, their parents shop at gas stations. So sometimes we talk about those issues. Uh, that the teachers love it because it allows them to sit back and have maybe a couple times a month a knowledgeable expert come in. Students get to know us. What I've done in the classroom, I've made some videos and published them. I have the students present. So I'll have them talk about phytochemicals. What's a phytochemical? Fiber. What's fiber? How can I eat beans? And how can I not, pass gas? How can
Right.
I be a good neighbor? And then at least here, we haven't done it in the other healthy snack programs, is I throw a feast. I throw a big vegan feast, the same place I hold the fancy Thanksgiving. And so the kids, they bring anybody they want, their grandparents, their parents, all the food. It's all whole food plant. It's mostly whole food plant based, all 100% vegan, and pretty low fat. And we eat. I give a slideshow, a presentation. I say, thank you for entrusting your kids to let me share some food and nutrition with them. And I share some evidence-based information about plant-based eating. I have DVDs. I have books for them to take home. Colin's book, Colin Campbell's books, Brenda's books. I have like a stack of 4 or 5 copies of a bunch of different books, and people go and grab what they want. And so it's a form of gentle education, because, Frank, one thing that's important to me is when I work with adults, I'll tell you like it is. I'll tell you why eating dead chickens is not a good thing.
Right.
But I don't do that with kids,
Right.
because what I say to kids is I know something about nutrition and I'll share with you all the benefits of plant-based eating. And if a child says, "My mom says I should eat chickens," I'm not going to get in between that sacred relationship. My answer to that is your parents know far better than I do about what's the best thing for you. If they want to ask my advice, I'm happy to share. And so because of that, we diffuse any "you're causing problems in my family," and that's not happened.
Right.
And I know I've been told by a number of families that they went vegan because of this program, and that's
You
success to me.
you touched on a sore point. In some of these poorer communities, food accessibility is an issue. Do you have any connection with local food banks or things of that nature where you connect people with surplus food that may come from places that are donating it? Is that any part of what you do in your community?
Not enough. Years ago in the Vegetarian Society, we used to celebrate something that Alex Hershaft started at Farm Animal Reform Movement, called the Great American Meat Out, which is March 20th or 21st. It's generally the first day of spring, and it's a day where we ask people to consider going without. I think initially it was go without meat, but the intention was go without animal products for a day. So what I used to do years ago, this is back in the 1990s and 2000s, is I would contact all the area mayors and I'd say, "Would you issue a proclamation?" I don't know, Frank, why they did. And it was kind of weird because I'd watch it and they'd be doing all this city business, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now proclamation. Mayor of Cary, North Carolina, hereby proclaims that today is meatless, is Great American Meat Out. Okay, next business.
Right.
Frankly, politically, it's probably not the best thing. And I actually had one mayor, I think it was in Raleigh, who not only did not endorse it, but endorsed like a meat eating group because he got political pressure. So in that case, it backfired.
Yeah,
But
he
but
got
but
pressure.
But we used to, for Great American Meat-Out, we used to feed at a homeless shelter. We'd go into the Durham Rescue Mission, and when you're just trying to survive, you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. Talk about the ethics of not killing animals is not, you're not ready for that generally. You want to know, how can I put food on the table? How can you get a job? And so we would go and make a plant-based meal. I wasn't whole food plant-based, I was vegan. So we would make a nice vegan meal. We'd have a whole bunch of people contribute. We'd have this big meal. And then I would give a short talk, not about the ethics of it, but how eating this way gives you more energy and gets you on the road to getting a job and being more energetic trying to find a job. So I was focused on you. How does it help you? Not so much animals and environment. So we did that. I've been for some years looking for, I've talked to some restaurants and asked, if I can generate some funds, would you be willing to not make your, fake meats and things and high fat foods, but would you be willing to make a healthy kale salad, no oil, this, that, and the other thing? And I've talked to two or three restaurant owners, and there's been a little bit of traction, but I put it on me. I didn't bring it home, to go ahead. We were talking about maybe dropping some food off at a church, and initially they'll eat it and they'll say, "Where's the fat? We don't like it." But oh, this is, initially free, so it'll serve me and I'll get some nutrition, and then over time they'll develop a taste for it. So we've talked about all sorts of trajectories like that, but haven't quite finished doing that. But I feel good that. Through my friend in Southern Alabama, she is definitely reaching a lot of people who are impoverished. So
Yeah,
the answer is, I'd like to, but I haven't done enough.
that's fantastic. Now, you spend so much time sharing tips and information on recipes and preparation, and I gather you've done this without really any culinary training. I think it's important for our audience to see that this is something you've done by picking things up along the way and trial and error and all of that, and that's a doable situation. I think sometimes people they're daunted by seeing some of these people that are vegan chefs, and they're kind of like, I really can't do that. And the truth of the matter is, anyone can do it. It's just a question of doing it, just getting a good start, starting with simple prep, and keep working with things so that you get a handle on a little variety, and that takes you further. So, talk a little bit about your own journey with that, because it seems to me that you were relatively self taught in all of this, or things that you gleaned by working with people who were doing this, and maybe some of them had some training too.
Yeah, so I grew up, my mom was an excellent cook. Was she a healthy cook? No, but she was an excellent cook.
Right.
And so I was surrounded by cooking. I mean, my poor mom, I mean, she would cook literally, almost literally all day. I'd come home from school and she'd be watching, what were the soap operas called, As the World Turns and other things. And
Right.
that was
As
her
the
break.
world,
But
General
even
Hospital, as the
General
world
Hospital,
turns.
but
When you,
even then,
yeah, good.
But even then, she was sorting lentils. She was taking rocks out. She would be having her
Right.
glasses. So she was busy then too. And that was just a short respite. And then she'd be back in the kitchen, right, and making dinner. So I was surrounded by cooking. Uh, and it's a good question you've asked, because when I went to college, we didn't have cafeteria for our second year. I had to cook. And was I a good cook? No. And I was making frozen pizzas. I wasn't vegan. I had just transitioned to vegetarianism. So it wasn't best food. It was easy prep, and I was a busy college student. So one day, in early in my second year, my friend Andre invited me to his apartment, and he said, "Come on over, let's get together." And we like, people love getting together, but what he offered was novel. He said, "I'll cook dinner for you." Because usually when you get together with friends, let's go out or let's just chat. He was going to make dinner for me, and I remember it was roasted vegetables. He cut eggplant and peppers. He put some oil on it. Now I know how to do it without oil. He put some oil on it, some spices,
Right.
and he broiled it, and it was really good. And he probably had a grain and a salad or something. And I scratched my head, Frank, and I said, if Andre can do that, I know a little bit about cooking. So I started having, in college, dinner parties at my place, very small, one friend I'd
Right.
bring over, right? And then in grad school, and if you want, we can talk about my tiny experience in medical school. So in medical school, I would do that too. I would make food, and so I kind of learn by myself. It's not that I'm not haven't been trained, because if you're in the Physicians Committee Food for Life program, we do get training.
Right.
So I have been trained, but not officially. I've actually been a teacher at a culinary school, and I've worked that way. So yeah, you're right. It's easy to pick up. And one of the things that's really important in the Physicians Committee Food for Life program is what we present is easy to cook and easy to prepare. And that's the same with so many cooks. Whatever we do is easy peasy. And I show people how I write recipes because people want them, but that's not how I cook. I just kind of throw things together, right? Like, thank you so much, Frank. I had to ask, can I be a couple minutes late? You said no, 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 and that was fine because I had a busy day. I was working with a bunch of kids today, so I put dinner together, of course, and it was easy. I just cut some tofu. Had a little bit of avocado, put that in, put some peppers, onions, and will you excuse me for bragging again a little bit?
Yeah, do it.
I'm bragging to answer your question. So I've known my wife more than 20 years. Do you know what I'm about to say? I think you know this
I
because
know
you've
what you're
researched
going to say, but say it.
it.
But say it.
It's
I
the
want to hear
truth.
it. I
It's
want
the
to hear it
truth.
again because I had a hard time believing it. So say it again.
Today, my wife is away. My wife and daughter are at the beach for a few days. I'm going to be joining them, but I'm by myself. I'm a bachelor, so I can cook what I want. I've known my wife more than 20 years, and I have never, I do almost all the cooking at home, ever repeated a dinner for her. So she has, you're right, I'm not trained, but even I, who doesn't have a chef's degree, 20 plus years of all vegan and recently mostly whole food plant based, no added fat dishes. And I still have tons of ideas of new things to do. I have
I
lots of
think it's
ideas.
fantastic. It's funny as you go through your past, I resonate because I grew up in an Italian household around constant food prep, so I kind of danced the same dance. I became very early on became very connected with really preparing food, doing food, and so when I really went into the vegan direction, it was really a no-brainer to just start to get really familiar with all of these plant-based foods and plant food, whole plant foods, and it's something that anybody can really do. And I want to highlight that because you've made the point that we can simplify that, where you can have fun, you can have great taste, it's easy prep, and it makes such an amazing contribution to well-being and performance. And on that note, let me touch on something because you part of you early on you talked about the idea that you wanted to share some of the ideas about reversibility. So let's touch on that just a little bit because too often that becomes overlooked. I think people have this sense that if we do what we're talking about, yeah, we can prevent things, but surely if you have a major problem, you've got to have to take some yeoman medical intervention. This simple lifestyle is not going to reverse these major conditions. So give me a little bit about your experience with reversibility.
I'll tell a story. My dad, when he was very young, had scarlet fever. I don't know much about scarlet fever, but apparently it causes a problem in the heart. And so the doctors at the time, I don't know, he was probably 4 or 5 years old or something, maybe even younger. The doctors at the time said, they probably didn't tell him, they probably told his parents that this boy, Lelit, is his name, Lelit, is at some point going to have heart surgery. Now, my mom, you can see her behind me. So
Yeah.
my mom was not a vegan and she didn't really resist. She would make vegan food when I'd go over to her house, and my dad got it. And my dad said, "I'd like to eat that way, but I don't know how to cook." So he, towards the end of his life, was eating. He was happy eating vegan food, and he was close close to veganism. Uh, I don't know if that's the reason, but he did have heart surgery, but he was already in his 70s, I think. So here's the story, Frank. Here's my dad in his 70s. He had heart surgery, and we had told the hospital vegan food, please. And as he came to in his recovery room, they had, I don't know if it was literally bacon, but it might as well have been. It was meat and eggs, I think. And uh, and I told them, and the staff was gracious, of course. I mean, the people who work at hospitals are superheroes. They are so overworked, and they do such wonderful, important work. And they're very gracious. They said, "We're sorry. We'll get some vegan food." But I talked to the doctor, the cardiologist, and I said, "Have you heard of Dr. Dean Ornish?" And he said, "Of course I have." And so, as you well know, Frank, Dr. Ornish has talked about the only way shown over and over. It's been proven, and it's been on not just scientific journals, but on TV, on PBS, on NPR specials, that you can reverse heart disease. And the efficacy rate is it 92% or 89% of stopping and reversing heart disease. That's a very high rate. It's about 90%. Let's call it 90. It's like either 88 or 92, something like that. And so there's three parts to it, as I'm sure you well know. One is low fat plant based eating. The other one is moderate exercise, as long as your doctor approves you. The third one surprises people. My wife's an atheist. My family's not religious, But the third part is prayer. And if you're not religious, centering, meditation, focus. So you don't have to pray, but prayer or centering or meditation, those three things will do it. And so I asked the cardiologist, do you know of this work? He said, of course I do. And I know it works. Why don't you tell the patients? You know what the cardiologist told me, Frank? They won't follow it.
Yeah, they
And
make this ridiculous decision about compliance that they don't have a right to do, because they really should just do what they do, and that work is really teaching. You should share the information and let the person make that decision. And that's a sad commentary on how they make judgments about compliance. And you're right, it happens all the time. Many of them know that you can reverse hypertension, you can reverse this or that,
diabetes.
but they really believe the patient or the people are just not going to do what they need to do. So they rather disease manage than really provide true health care, which is really sad.
You know what I said to the cardiologist? What's the harm in giving a piece of paper? This has a high likelihood of reversing your condition. And this is what you need to do. And even list resources like Local Food for Life instructors, or NHA or other organizations.
Right,
Lifestyle medicine. Look, see if your doctor is in lifestyle medicine. And if they rip it up, that's their business. But at least tell them, inform them that,
right,
right? It's like me. I'm also a math teacher. It's like me saying, well, people aren't going to get imaginary numbers, so let's skip the unit, right? Imaginary numbers are so important. I can present it and say this is going to be important in algebra for
right.
these reasons. If you choose not to study it, so be it. But I'm going to test you on it. It's important.
Fortunately, you're getting a lot of specialists in lifestyle medicine that are really starting to really spread that message more dramatically. And so I'm happy to see that that's actually going on, because you're right, the information needs to be out there. Well, Dilip, as we kind of wind this down, are there any final words you'd like to share with the audience out here?
Those of you, we're often self-selecting audiences. I'm suspecting many of you are already aboard, and if you are, welcome. And if you are aboard, all of us, myself included, can always improve our game. Less fatty foods, maybe less eating out, more whole foods. Am I 100% whole food? No, I'm close, but I'm not. So sometimes I eat some processed foods. So all of us can always improve. So if you're in that situation, wonderful. I hope that I've given a tiny bit of inspiration for you to move the boat a little forward. Those of us who aren't plant-based, it's okay, right? This is not the culture we live in that promotes it. And your doctor doesn't always know about this. So check out credible references. Don't just Google something and run with it. Look at PCRM. Look at Michael Greger. I wish we had more time. I'd love to spend 10 minutes talking about Michael Greger. Look at Brenda Davis. Look at all these people, because I want to tell you something, Frank. You know this. Pick any diet. There are people out there who will say, eat more meat. There are people, not me, and they'll cite a little bit of evidence. There's evidence for almost everything. Look at the plant-based world and look at the mountains of evidence. The thing that separates us are minor issues. No oil, a little bit of oil, no salt, how much sweetener, how much fat, right? So is it 10% fat, 12%? There's some honest
Right.
differences of opinion. We just don't have all the data, but the evidence is strong. Go plant-based. And that's the message, Frank, I would leave your audience with. And that is easy. It's easy.
Well, I can't thank my guest today, Dilip Barman, enough for sharing his information and the beautiful work he's doing with turning people on to plant-based living. I urge you to follow Dilip. You see his URL scrolling across the screen. And I want to thank all of the people that have joined us today, because without you, we can't do what we do.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for being part of this really active, healthy community. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. Thank you so much, Dilip. Really, it's been an honor.
Thank you, Frank. It's an honor for me. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.